I believe that you have to unmute yourself. OG, can I take your preferred pronouns and speaking orders?
Sorry, male, he, and I'm gonna do Ironman, so just me.
Great, and OO. OO, can I get your speaking orders and preferred pronouns?
Sorry about that. Speaking first at you, preferred pronouns here, they, please.
And second?
Speaking second, Clinton, he, please. May I ask for permission to use a virtual background, just because I'm a bit shy of my my real background?
I believe that this is an OrCom question, but I'm sure just for this round, people wouldn't mind. If anyone has any objections, I guess you can type to me privately in chat right now. And then I'll let you know by the end of roll call whether or not people have objected. Great, CG?
All right, thank you so much.
No worries, CG?
Itai speaks first, preferred pronoun is he.
Jacklin speaking second, no preference.
Great, and CO?
Ozam speaking first, no preference.
Onur speaking second, no preference.
Great. So I'll be keeping time in the Zoom chat. So I'll be indicating the 1 minute mark, the 6 minute mark, as well as the 7 minute mark. And I'll be keeping my video on for the rest of the debate because I think it'll give you a slightly more human interface. And Clinton, I don't believe anyone has objected to you using a virtual background as long as it's in good faith, of course. So without further ado, Great. Without further ado, let me introduce the Prime Minister to open the debate. Here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, today we debated the topic of how we should administer our university exams for students to be. And we of Opening Government firmly believe that it is utmost important in this time, in this age, to only allow standardized testing as opposed to non-quantitative methods as lined out, for example, essays or interviews. More on that later. First, I will give like a brief wider explanation of how to understand and debate this motion. Then I will go over the argument of social justice. Afterwards, I will talk about allocation efficiency, and lastly, get on about specific relevance of the points mentioned. Probably I'll do the allocation efficiency and the relevance in my second speech. So first speech, what are we actually talking about? I feel the topic is pretty clear. Just to phase it out a bit more, what we believe is that right now in some courses or in some universities, it is custom that maybe only methods are taken into account that are not objectively. What means objectively? People basically the idea is that if a computer could do can't do this kind of work, then it isn't objectively, or can't grade the kind of exercise that is given, then it isn't objectively. And if I could summarize every of the exercises that would make up that kind of score to give like basically numbered result, then that's a good indication for this to be a quantitative measure. That means like we can imagine ourselves to have a lined out a set of questions asked, and if there's like an easy way of saying yes, no, this is right, this is wrong, then and grading points after that, then we can surely say that this is a quantitative measure. So of course this isn't completely specific, and the problem here is probably that because of the wide nature of university administration, that will never be the case, but that should be like the wider distinction, or one wide distinction should be if the test can be made into a multiple choice exercise and can be evaluated by a computer, then that's basically something that we would most likely call objective measurement. And in case we can't do this and we would need a human brain to evaluate it, and we can think that different human beings would evaluate the test differently, then we would most likely say this is not an objective measurement. Okay. So how does this influence, and what's the problem that we see right here? Basically, the main problem that we see is that our world grows more and more socially unjust. That means that if you are rich and have the money and resources to provide your children with especially good education, then it's likely that not because of inherent will or fitting to a topic, but because you have like the better starting conditions, you will most likely be end up at having an easier point, which is bad for society, because it means that we form bubbles that will hamper the ability of our societies to allocate people most widely and to have a mutual understanding of the society as a whole. Because if we form bubbles of elites and bubbles of non-elites, or bubbles of, I don't know, mathematicians or of lawyers, and those stay only in themselves, then it also harms our democracy and all those and other aspects of living together, because the understanding of us virtually relies on us understanding each other, which won't be the case if we form those bubbles as mentioned. Okay, so how do non-standardized tests hurt those hurt social justice? Well, we can there are three parts of the tests that we should analyze. The first is preparation, the second is during the test, and the second is the evaluation of the test or after the test. The preparation of the test is flawed in both ways, because in both cases we have, like, if you're rich and if you have the money to pay for it, you can afford good tutors, you can afford better material, you will most likely be 1 second for the PI. You will be able to afford better tutors, and that means that you will have the possibility to be more like do special exercises for the testing also. But that's like, it doesn't really matter if that's for a standardized text or if it's about writing an essay. In both cases, it's probably flawed. But we feel that probably it's easier to prepare for a standardized text than to prepare for an essay. So that means it's more a function of how hard you work than how well the tutor you have knows that how to write an essay well. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That means, like, that's why the preparation part, we would see social justice be not the major point, but we would expect it in preparation, social justice gets decreased. Okay, during the test, there we only see the basic point that in some points, like, for example, alumni interviews or other forms of direct contact, we would expect people of higher socio-economic background to have like a different habitus that people from the same the same background would probably also expect and internally think of as more convincing, of as more competent, and so on. So in such an interview, if you have the better background, then that will help you, although that's not the case for every test. And the main impact here is after the test, or in the the evaluation of the test, because here it is clear that every aspect of a standardized text will always be more fair, because you can't tell, given by the answer, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you to that speaker for that fine speech. Let's welcome the next speaker from OO.
So am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Sure, 1 second, let me just pull up my stopwatch. Okay. I'm going to talk about three things in this speech. First, on how we're more likely to include the disadvantaged in a university experience. Two, how a diversity of perspectives in a university class is good in and of itself and why we get that. Three, how like government's policy restricts social and societal development, particularly of children. But first, some bits of rebuttal. Government tells us that like during prep, it is very likely that people have access to tutors that can train them to do things such as for essays, right? Note first of all that this like analysis applies equally to objective tests. On opening opposition, we tell you that fundamentally it is easier to train someone for an objective test. We think it is more likely that like an undeserving rich person is going to get a private tutor and get trained for their objective test than it is likely that they're able to like write an essay and convince an interviewer that they should be let in. Why is this the case? We think that broadly objective tests are simply just like tests of your mechanistic ability to like solve a maths problem, solve a science problem, right? We think that with enough time and enough training, most people can be taught to do this, right? Fundamentally, who has the most time to train? Who has the most resources to train? It's the very richest. They're very likely to like dominate this test. Why is this not the case with an essay or with an interview? Right? We think that broadly, like an essay and an interview allows you not just to like demonstrate your writing ability, but also allows you to talk about your lived experiences. And this is what we stand for on our side of the house, right? Broadly, we stand for like an admissions policy that seeks to like subjectively and holistically evaluate a candidate as a whole and see that they are like maximizing what they can do within their own lived experiences, right? We think that like broadly, if you grew up like poor in like a, you know, like in a bad neighborhood, you can talk about that in your essay. You can talk about your life circumstances. And then like the admissions officers can evaluate you in the context in which you have like existed in your first 18 years. They're more likely to pick deserving candidates this way, whereas they can't see your context on an objective test. Secondly, he tells us that interviewers like internalize certain norms. Again, we broadly think that like a professional like admissions team that is like trained and like wants to develop like a strong class, the most deserving candidates like possible, is more likely to be able to like identify like their certain internalized biases, train against that, things like that, right? Okay, so quickly onto my substantive case. First, we tell you that we are more likely to get the disadvantage because we think that like the disadvantage lose out on an objective test in three ways. One, they generally have worse home environments in which to study. Two, they have less resources like private tutors. And three, they have worse schools. Right? We think that broadly, this means they're never going to be as good at like mechanistic solving of mathematics or science problems as the rich on their side of the house. We think that it is very unlikely that they get into university and definitely not the top universities. Even if they like fiat affirmative action, which they have not done, we think that like broadly, all an objective test does is select for the people who have the best schooling available, who have the best resources available. It does not allow for like an admissions team to evaluate you in the context in which you exist and therefore make a decision on who is the most deserving, who is most likely to succeed in a university environment. Right? What is the impact of this? Broadly, we think that like, first of all, their side of the house ignores people who may not necessarily have like performed well academically because they didn't have the right schooling or the right like environment at home, but broadly are successful individuals. Maybe they like started a small business. Maybe they like did extracurricular activities. Maybe they volunteered in their community. Things that take a lot of effort, things that like demonstrate your capability in society, but are simply ignored by objective criteria. We get more underprivileged people into university on our side. We think that leads to A, more social mobility. We think that that is necessarily good. And then as these people gain more economic and social capital, we think they're likely to like effect change throughout society. But more than that, what we tell you on our side of the house is that when we like use subjective criteria, we get a greater diversity of experiences in our academic institutions. Right? Like we think that like when you read essays about your lived experiences, about like where you're from, who your family is, we think that like admissions officers are likely to select and like have access to a greater diversity of perspectives of like societal experience, as opposed to just the people who could do best on their like maths or science tests. right? What we think is that, first of all, university life is about like expanding your perspectives, like seeing what's in the world, like growing your worldview, and a more diverse class of classmates is in and of itself a good because it allows you to have a better university experience. But more than that, right, we think that like when we put more diverse people in academic institutions, it is likely to change the nature of these academic institutions themselves, which are traditionally exclusionary, particularly to minorities, right? As more people get in, they're likely to like change the perspectives of these academic institutions, and in the long run they're likely to like enter again the higher echelons of academia, change things that way. I'd like to take closing government.
Yes, if you want more people from more minorities in university, we can achieve that also with standardized testing. Just give them priority in the grades as opposed to.
Again, I've just told you, right? Like fundamentally, even if you like via affirmative action, you're likely to select A for the most privileged people within your disadvantaged group. But like broadly, you're still likely to select the same kind of person, right? The same kind of person that can sit and crack like a maths or science test, right? Like you are ignoring a great diversity of experience in terms of like your volunteering work, in terms of your extracurricular work that is broadly valuable to society, proves intellectual rigor, but doesn't shine through on an actual test. Right? More than that, we think that their policy restricts social and societal development. Right? We think that broadly, parents are likely to encourage their children to do things that get them into the best universities possible, as they see this as the best way to progress within society. Right? So on their side of the house, this means that parents are going to make their kids study, right? Because like all they're going to do is like sit and study because this is what's going to get you into university. We think that this broadly means that children, A, are unhappier because they sit at home and study all day. They're less likely to have like social experiences. They're less likely to do extracurricular activities that take a lot of time. We think that this is a net bad because it makes children less happy, less well-rounded people. But more than that, we think that like broadly, we get a more successful society on our side because not only are the children happy, we think that when you do like a variety of different things, you're likely to develop a greater wealth of talents among your population that we lose on their side of the house. We're likely to get a more creative population as children are exposed to more extracurricular activities, more creative activities that will then help them to get into university. Like this is like irrespective of whether or not we get more social mobility, which I've proved to you that we do, we get a more like well-rounded group of individuals entering like the elite tiers of society. They're more likely to A, effect change, be more creative, and solve greater problems in the future. And for all these reasons and the reasons my partner will beg you to vote opening opposition.
Thank you to both speakers that have spoken so far. Let me introduce the next speaker from OG.
I think there's one final flaw in the analysis of the first speaker of opening opposition, and that's just basically all of his analysis is saying, okay, we see a lot of reasons why the status that opening government puts forward is not great, and then we say like there's one final point, there's exactly one point that they say why they are better than our side, and that's basically, okay, I can write an essay, and the essay I will write out, okay, I have like so many extracurricular activities and that's the experience of my life. However, I feel that's a pretty unfair characteristic to say that we have like a wide variety of possibilities of how universities could accept students. Like we could say interviews, we could say like challenges that somebody puts up in a creative way also, and it's pretty unclear like why all those diverse possibilities of how to measure people should have the similar characteristics of like the specific essay in which I line out how I'm with my extracurricular activities are especially well trained for this. And that's another point. Even essays are not usually only about extracurricular activities. I could also say, please write an essay about how to solve like this specific problem, which maybe is definitely not a quantitative thing, but it's still one of the things that would fall under the things that opening opposition needs to defend. So that they actually take like the very best case they can actually get, which is not representative of all cases, and then they compare it to the wide possibilities that I put out, which is a more fairer characterization, because I actually say, look at the real world and say, okay, there's like a lot of different subjects, and the defining point of opening government mechanism is to say it must be measurable. That's the defining point. And they basically say, yeah, we will accept people for medical classes because they can write how well they did on their guitar lessons. I believe that's definitely not how a medical exam or entrance exam will be done, and that's why the analysis there falls short. But so first of all, I will also talk a bit about, like, even if we take that case into account, why that's still bad. So opening upset, yeah, so then people will do extracurricular activities, and the privileged kids will be way happier because they will do like these activities. I feel that the typical point that people would see is that those kids nowadays, if you look at American schools, for example, they get the parents force them not to do math exercises, not only math exercises, but then they have to play, I don't know, the guitar or piano, go to this club or that club, but there's no reason why they would like that better than solving math problems also. It's not like, I don't see why a specific extracurricular activity that my parent will then force me to do will make me happier than if to solve math problems that I might not need to do. So that point, like, even in the best case, that we should not assume, they actually don't have a plausible point why this would be better. Okay, then to put up my points again about social justice and why standardized texting is better. The essential point is it is pretty easy to actually prepare for those kind of tests. And that's what I said, the main function of a standardized text is usually hard work. You actually need to sit down and you need to, and you basically know what to do, because, like, even if you get a tutor, all the tutor does is usually correct your mistakes. But it's like a very straightforward thing. I'm getting a book. I will look into the book, what's the thing that's required of me to do, and then I just practice it over and over again. It's pretty boring, but that's the reason why it's actually a lot about how much you actually like the subject and not about how much the tutor can correct your expression of words or something, and afterwards people will like your essay better because you have like a very refined expression or something. So in that regard, even if you compare those two words, then actually the standardized texting is better, because I wouldn't require such a good tutor. I can like have my mom correct it, or I can have like a friend correct myself on math problems. It doesn't need to be someone who has actually passed it. It just needs to be someone who's kind of good in the subject, in comparison to someone on opening opposition side of the house who would actually need to be like really, really good, and who would like to understand some more complex issues, and in order for him to teach me or her. So that's why I would say standardized texting there is on that side. And of course, where I was cut off on the last speech, because after the testing, it is way more objective to actually say, I'm measuring, like, if it's something like right or false. If I'm correcting a multiple choice test, then I don't have any hint if that's actually a privileged or underprivileged kid. If I'm correcting an essay or like in the interview and say, how did he perform? And I'm trying to recollect that, or I'm trying to judge how well an essay is written, then even if it's anonymous from who that person comes, I will always have like the feeling of words, the habitus that's written into it, and that kind of stuff. So it's in that regard, there's a real difference between standardized texting, testing and non-standardized texting, and there the justice point is definitely on government side. Okay. Why does this also create an increased allocation efficiency? Well, the basic point here is, if I really want to do something, then I will always be more efficient than that on average than people who will just be there because they had the right tutors or so. And in our side, even a little bit independent of the former points, what I was explaining before is that the standardized texting relies on your hard work. Even if we have like more of the, even if you just look into the group of the privileged kids and just see where that leads us, then we'll see that those privileged kids need to be actually really hardworking. The main point about this is, are you hardworking? Are you really able to put into the work to do this? And if you don't, then you will be way less behind, and it's way less about randomness than about that hard work. So that means that you actually have to put a lot into it, and you will most likely be more putting into it if you actually like the subject. If you like the subject, you will do better in university, and you will also more likely be able be taking the job later on. So that means that in the end, we have more people, even if we just look at the very privileged, or if we look at the group of the unprivileged 2000 who get into those kind of jobs or in university and then to the jobs. because they actually really enjoy or even if minor aspects about underprivileged kids in the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you to that speaker for that fine speech. Let's welcome the next speaker from OO.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Thank you. Panel, the gist of our case is clear. Standardized testing do not accurately depict a person and the variety of lived experiences in which that person has gone through. And we think this is a very important criteria for universities to consider. It is just, and they deserve to know a person's lived experiences because it is important in knowing how they will fit into the university and how they will be able to enrich the university's lives. I'll be talking about two things in my speech. Firstly, who makes university more accessible, because this is like largely OG's case. And secondly, I'll be bringing back what RTU has told to you about having diversity and the holistic development of children, which went largely unresponded to by OG, by the way. But before I go on to these two things, firstly, I just want to rebut OG's allocation of efficiency argument. He mainly says, with standardized testing, you're able to have people who are hardworking get into the universities because these are the people who want it more or who do better in these universities. Because if they're willing to put in the work for this standardized test, they're therefore more hardworking and will do better in these universities. Two responses. One, we also have standardized testing under our side. It's just that we also provide essays and all these other things to provide a more holistic background. So we can also assess hardworkingness. Second thing, under our side, we are better able to assess how hardworking you actually are. Because understand, a rich individual who does SATs or ACT practices 2 hours a day is still, to be honest, not as hardworking as a Black man or a poor person who had to work 3 jobs a day while doing 2 hours of ACTs and SATs. And this can only be reflected if you go for an essay or you go for an interview and you're asked about these things. Therefore, you're better able to capture just how hardworking people are. Now, going on into my two things, right? Firstly, who makes university more accessible? OG says rich white people can get in because they can afford tutors and all this. 3 responses. 1, the harm is symmetric. Under your world, rich individuals can also obtain tutors, right? Second response, RTU already told you that at least people from poor and minority backgrounds will be able to utilize the diversity of experience they have throughout their poor lives or as being part of a minority community. You can utilize in this application so interviewers can see their actual journey in coming to where they are today. They can also see the diverse perspective in which this individual can bring to university, which is something that university admission officers obviously want because it enriches the lives of other students at their university. The third thing to say is that OG says that, yeah, you can have practice. OG says that practicing standardized tests is much more accessible because all you need is hard work. 2 responses to this. 1, time, and I would say mostly rich individuals will have the time to put in this hard work because a lot of poor individuals are busy working or they have to care about finding rent for other stuff. Therefore, under your side, rich individuals actually get more of a leg up because they are able to use the free time to work hard in these things. Now, what does OG say next? OG says that interviews and essay reviewers are racist and will discriminate against you. 2 responses to this. 1, we think that a lot of these university admission officers are trained to be objective. That is why more often than not, why they get these roles. Because more often than not, these people have to be objective. They know that it's bad to discriminate against other individuals because of ethnicity or because of religion. They're therefore more aware of their unconscious bias, right? Especially in the best universities, because often the best universities often live in a liberal bubble, and therefore they're very acute as to the subconscious biases that they have towards the minority groups. The second reason why OG is wrong is because a lot of universities do want diversity because they want to be seen as liberal, because they want to be seen as having a diverse range of experience for which students can come and learn. Because it's like I wouldn't say it's objectively true, but I think it is very much accepted and assumed in the liberal bubble that a lot of these universities are much better when you have a lot of different people coming from different backgrounds. Then you can challenge your own views and come to a consensus or discuss what actually is how the work should be. But thirdly, this is the even if argument. Even if there is discrimination by university admission officers, we think this can be easily called out. CF, Harvard was called out for possibly discriminating against Asian minorities in the interview process by saying that their personality wasn't what they wanted. We think that it's therefore we have precedents for this, and we've even called out a very big university for this, and therefore we think this serves as a check and balance for preventing this sort of things in the future. The third thing that OG says is that affirmative action is still available. We agree that this is still available, but we think this is not enough to really capture the nuance of what we want, of the experiences we want. Because understand that affirmative action only allows you in or gives you space if you're Black, for example. But this is not nuanced, and this is too blunt an instrument to capture what universities should be admitting. For example, if there's an affirmative action policy for Black individuals, only the richest Black people will be able to get in under your standardized testing model because they're the ones who can afford tutors. They're the ones who live roughly similar lives to the white majority, for example. Therefore, you don't get the actual lived experience of the poor man who grew up in Harlem on the streets and had to work 3 part-time jobs to sustain college. Going on into, therefore, under our side, clearly, we just provide more accessibility. And the 2 things that Akira brought to you, which was never responded. One, firstly, it's about the diversity of people that you get, right? I think this is fairly obvious given that we have given you the incentives for admission officers that want to admit more diverse range of experiences. This means more minority groups, people from poorer backgrounds, people from different backgrounds will be allowed in, and you can only capture this through essays and interviews. We understand that having more different experiences, we think that this is better for the university experience because it challenges everyone's worldview, right? For example, if a rich white individual sits next to a Black person who grew up in Harlem, having to work 3 jobs a day while studying for college, this means they're more likely to understand what it's like to be there, for example. Or if they're discussing economics and trickle-down economic theory, the minority individual can just tell them whether or not it actually trickles down or provide his own perspective on whether that economic theory actually works, rather than buying into the the elite white man's version of this theory. The third thing that Akira brought to you, which was very important and never responded to, was the holistic development of children. Because understand, if you only had standardized tests, students will focus on just doing those tests and redoing those tests over and over again, which don't actually improve the student's ability or the student's I would say a quality of his intellectual capacity, right? But if you have essays and all these other interviews, they're persuaded and incentivized to go and try different things, to go for more competitions, to go to Bangladesh to do a charity organization, for example. And even if they don't get into the university in the end, this experience at least still stay with them. We create more holistic people on the outside because they will want to portray a more holistic person, individual to be admitted through essays and through interviews. With that, I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you to all top half speakers that participated so far. Let me introduce the first closing half speaker, government member.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm going to do in this debate is 2 main things. Firstly, I want to explain why we think that in most cases, what might happen when we have non-quantitative tests is just many people will be accepted and then will not succeed in the school. They'll feel frustrated, they feel bad, they will feel like they wasted money and time. And we think this is a good reason because we don't know how to screen them effectively. Secondly, we want to talk about explain more deeply the huge amount of a broad and systematic discrimination that will happen, not only toward poor people, as said by open government, but also toward women and toward Black people or other substantial minorities. First of all, a few points of rebuttal. So first of all, we don't think that opposition can claim that you can have both quantitative and non-quantitative. We think that, first of all, that's not how the debate was said by open government. But secondly, obviously, it's symmetrical in both sides of the debate. If the standardized test is what is the main reason to screen someone, then the other forms of screening are going to be not as important. Okay, secondly, so they claim us that they want to do it holistically. We think that the main question in this debate is whether you'll be able to effectively screen them. Will you able to effectively understand whether they will be possible to succeed in school, in the university later? We think that the damage might be bad, as I said in the framing. We think there are many courses in which you need to learn and study very heavily, and then you get tests, and after that you get a grade. And if you get regularly bad grades, then you feel like you wasted time and money, as I said before. And I'll go into my points why we think that the standardized test is far more effective tool. Another point of rebuttal is, I want to put it out there that it's like extremely symmetrical to both sides, whether if you are more rich, you're more likely to be accepted. Why? Because even if we'll talk about the interviews and writing essays, if you are very rich, we think that a few things are likely to happen. First of all the schools are going to, like the good schools, are going to put lots of effort into improving the people's situation, to do more interviews, to do more things, even things that say by opening oppositions, like going to courses and so on, like extracurricular activities. So we think that and secondly, we think rich people will be able to have like a special courses of how to display yourself in an interview that gives you like secret questions that they ask in the interview and like tell you how to like the main type of questions, how to effectively answer them. We think that no matter what you'll do, the more money you have, the more able you are to prepare, the more time you have, and the more so we think they can't claim, or at least they didn't analyze why specifically interviews are something that break completely who has more money. They claim that if you'll go to more extracurricular activities, you'll be a better person later. I don't understand why. We think that if you study deeply more math, science, and programming, you might contribute more to society. And why? So they claim to us, look, we can train people to be objective, and that's how we'll avoid discrimination. Few things why we think it's not possible. I just don't know what type of training are they talking about. Like, what is the training that can take someone who does things that he doesn't aware of that are discriminatory and teach them how to notice that and how to avoid that? There's zero analysis there, so I don't think that's even possible. But secondly, we think that in most cases, these discriminatory behaviors are like you're not aware that you're doing it. It was proven in tests that you show people pictures of like minorities and you show them very fast, and even if they claim that they are not discriminatory, they act in a discriminatory way. So we don't think it's even possible. Okay, so let's go to my main point. So first point, why we think that we're going to get lots of discrimination. There are very bad ideas in society, okay? For example, lots of people think that women can be in STEM subjects. Lots of people think that minorities are less likely to be successful and are less adjusted to high schools. For example, medical schools, and think that are very tough. They think, oh, they're, as opening opposition said, oh, they probably had like lots of experience with running different businesses, so they might be just good business people, but they can't be good scientists. We think that what happens is that at the moment that they come to the interview, somebody looks at their CV and they see a name, they see a look, they see the style of speak when they speak and do the interview. They see one point of detail, and then they have a confirmation bias that leads them throughout all the interview, okay? So for example, let's say I ask someone a small scientific question and he doesn't know it. If it's a man, I might claim, oh, maybe he doesn't know this specific thing, so I'll keep asking other questions, and then I realize that he's good. But it might be the same woman with the same type of knowledge, and I'll just say to myself, oh, I see that she doesn't know science very well, so I'll just skip it, okay? I'm claiming that this thing might happen unconsciously because of these things, and at the moment that I see it, and I keep like just everything that they say, and I keep like justifying what I think before. And we think that the impact is big. We think that we like when we have standardized tests, at least if they are very good, if they are like studied very hard and become very prepared, there is no person in the cycle that can break this and they will be successful. Before I continue to my next point, I'll take POI from opening opposition.
If it is the case that bias is widespread, why is it that these women will not receive like worse scientific education, less attention from their teachers at the school level, and therefore never even learn the content to perform on an objective test?
So we think that does happen to some extent. We think we put lots of efforts to fix this. So one of the efforts to fix it is use standardized tests. We think that some of the women who worked very hard and became successful in school should have the ability now to prove themselves in the university and not being screened now by another obstacle. The fact that you have some sort of obstacles don't justify just adding far more obstacles. But we think that with a non-standardized test, you can also measure someone's success later in university. 4 main reasons. First of all, you can check the amount, the ability to work hard. We think that in order to be successful in university, after you have like a course and you have like a lecture, you need to go hard and study very hard, go through all the things that being told. You need to go and do exercises. You need to like put lots of effort of just like, you alone in the room, like and like keep working on this very hardly. If you won't do it, you won't remember stuff, you won't be able to express yourself effectively, and you won't be able to succeed in the test in the end. We think that people who studied very hard in school, they are likely to be successful in the standardized test, are very likely to develop this ability, and that's why they're very likely to be successful later in university. Secondly, the standardized tests show you your first point of when you begin. It means it shows you what's your current knowledge. This is very important because if you go to the first time of the first school in mathematics and you don't know lots of the basic things that people assume that you already know, in standardized tests you know what people know, but when they are standardized tests, it's very hard to know whether he knows all the basic things in mathematics, and then they find very hard in the beginning, and it's hard for them to keep track and suddenly go and fill all the gaps. We think that only based on standardized tests, people know what they want better. We call you to go to standardized tests.
Thank you to that speaker for that fine speech. Let's welcome the next speaker from CO.
I'm starting 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. I'm going to explain why there is no perfect standardized test and why non-quantitative methods are better for testing students, for education, and for disadvantaged people. But first, some rebuttals. For opening government, they have this kind of view: computers are objective and students should be rated objectively. But in academy, people evaluate people already. So why it is important to accept people in academy to choose them according to computers is not explained well, and being objective is not a obstacle for evaluating by people. For CG, like we can put quotas.
Maybe if I could just stop the speaker right there.
So we
sorry, may I interrupt the speaker for a little bit? You're cracking up quite a bit, so could I maybe recommend that you maybe turn off your video? Maybe it'll be a bit easier for you to be audible. I've stopped the timer, and you are at 1 minute and 9 seconds. Can you test your microphone now?
Is it okay now?
It's much. I think it's much. Yeah, I think it's much better now. Okay, awesome.
Yes.
You can just pick up where you left off.
Okay. Okay. Prevent people to choose according to their subjective ideas. We can show them works from the students anonymously, so they cannot know who is whose work is it, and we can make a council to decide, and councils include different people from different origins, different ethnics, and different genders, etc. So we can prevent the discrimination and subjectivity. And let's begin to arguments. There is no perfect standardized test because this test evaluating is problematic. Questions are inadequate to evaluate knowledge of people. They put a scenario on it, and we give a specific time for students, and this makes them stressful. This creates a pressure on them, and they cannot show their ability in that time. and this is problematic to evaluate their knowledge, and we cannot ask the perfect question to cover every point in a topic. So it's there is no perfect standardized test. And why non-quantitative methods are better for testing? They are more likely in real academy. In real academy, people value the products. It's important to take citations, for example, and it's a proper measure. So evaluating students according to people is not false, actually. It's they are all people already evaluated, are evaluated by other people, other academicians. So it's not a big deal. And evaluating their expression ability, students' expression ability, is important because in real life, people need this ability to explain their ideas, to study in team. So we cannot understand if we put them choices and select one in this system, we cannot understand their ability to explain themselves. And this is important, and we should give place these students in academia. And we can create original math questions, for example, not have a exact solution. We can understand students' ideas and students' ability to think in mathematics, etc. We can evaluate them better in this way, and it's better for education because preparing in this way is better for students. They do not memorize informations anymore. They use their knowledge in real problems and show it. They simulate real academic experiences and study for it, like writing an essay is a real academic ability, and we evaluate them from this ability. And I already said there is a pressure, there is a real pressure on them, and the stressful exams do not only opportunity anymore, and this pressure impacts students very badly. They commit suicides for it. It's bad, and better students will take place in academy is better for academy. Because before the I can take POI.
We think that the motion only speaks about admission. That means that later when they go actually to do the courses, they'll have the same standardized tests as they have currently, and that's why they will not be prepared and they will more likely to fail.
Okay, opening opposition already answered the economic aspects of the problems. So I do not need to answer again this topic, but for the most important is disadvantaged people in our case, because academy is a very important area for them to study, them to work, because they cannot work in other areas. They cannot find a job. For example, a blind people cannot find a job in industry, or some disabled people also, or dyslexic people can have hardness in these work areas. So the system is not enough for them since the beginning, and we cannot teach their we cannot educate them properly, and exams are not a good and equal opportunity to evaluate their ability, and it's important to evaluate their skills because they cannot read the exam, they cannot equal the other students. So this system is actually important for them. So it's important that to give them to this chance to them, and in exams they cannot have the same ability to answer the questions with them. For example, a blind people, they need to listen for somebody, and because therefore we proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you to that speaker for that fine speech. Let's welcome the final speaker of GovBench, GovWeb.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Fantastic. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Two main clashes I would like to focus in my speech. First of all, whether or not we get more diverse university experience. Secondly, whether we get people more capable of succeeding in university. Before that, I would like to engage with what we heard from CG, and I would like to genuinely apologize because I did not hear part of the speech, and I'm sorry if I do not engage with. Let's engage with what I did here. First of all, they tell us that like standardized testing is not perfect in its own right. We agree. We think this is extremely uncomparative. That gave us a couple of reasons as to why it is imperfect. A, they tell us that students are nervous and cannot get all of their knowledge through. Secondly, they tell us that they cannot ask everything within this interviewing process, within the standard step process fairly. They tell us that there are important skills which do not go through. We think that all of those things also apply to both interviews and written pieces and essays. Note that they will be stressed out in also in interview and also when writing that paragraph. They will not be able to. I don't know like how skilled you can be in writing an essay to transfer every single thing, and I don't know why the question will cover everything. Fairly, they tell us that there are many important skills which do not pass, like the ability to solve problems, whatever. I really do not know why mathematics or like other sciences cannot come forward with this ability. And if this is specifically the metric that CG is going to be go so hard on, we think that even within like a non-mathematical like questions, you can still get subjective answers and evaluate them within tests. We really don't know why those skills are less important than those CG is trying to speak about. Let's go on to whether or not we get more onto the first class where we get more diverse university experience. Note that OO told us a couple of things. They tell us that we can use it to prioritize more disadvantaged people. We claim we can do it both sides. Their nuance is that that on our side of the house, we will still get the more advantage within those disadvantaged people because they will have higher standardized testing. Note that this is extremely uncomparative. Also, as already pointed out by OG, the richer people within those minorities will have more ability to like get themselves through in an interview and show their abilities. Therefore, they will still have come off as better within the interview process and will be able to put more emphasis on why they are disadvantaged and show themselves have more disadvantage. Know the fact that even if I'm rich and I live in a poor neighborhood, I can still frame it in a way that will make it seem like I really need more support. We think that your ability to come through that is dependent on your ability to express yourself and how you can format your interview and how you can prepare for those interview questions. Those are all things which are more valuable to the richer part of our society. Second reason, note the second part about the subjectivity of the interviewers and we are able to do so. We already claimed, we already told that we really don't know what is a course that we can get them to take to completely solve racism. But we also think that their ability to understand those specific issues are very limited. Note that they've lived their own life, they have their personal experience and they have their view of the world. They know their life, which are probably significantly they were probably better off than the majority of those highly disadvantaged people, and therefore they will probably put emphasis on specific issues, which is how outsiders view this community. They are more likely to put emphasis on their own things that they associate as harder and they have experience, or at least the very limited things which they heard what of in the community. It's very hard for them to evaluate from the outside what is actually subjectively hard, what is objectively harder, and therefore it will come down to the semantics of the application. Third, note and a very important way as to why we win this clash, note that the argumentation we heard from all other things in the debate only talks about an economic on the socioeconomic background. Note that you can be have a medium income or even a good income and still be disadvantaged and still be discriminated against. Note, if you're a person of color with the medium income on your country, it does not mean you cannot be discriminated. Again, despite the entirety of the analysis of both opposition's team being about the fact that you will not have access to private teachers or your parents will not be able to give you as much resources, we think that those people are even those people might have same access to those things, but we still wouldn't want to put them at a disadvantage in a in university A. We think this one on its own can do not allow them to succeed on their own ability and simply discriminated them due to their background, due to their lifestyle. Secondly, know the entire analysis of OO about why we want a more diverse university experience and more background. That does not only mean economical one, it means we want more different control, we want more minorities, we want more background, things which we can which are not a problem in standard testing as much as like analysis that we give you, and that we can still encourage using the mechanism of just accepting them with lower scores on the standard testing. Know the entire analysis of OO of why university really want to have a diverse pool of applicants will show us that we are likely to have this diverse. Before I continue, POI OO.
Yes, we admit that rich people also have the money to train themselves for interviews and essays. However, because they will all be trained in the same way, they will be seen as sort of a cookie cutter sort of thing and be less authentic. However, people from poorer backgrounds and minorities can utilize the rich, diverse experience that they have and stand out among all these different rich individuals. They can't do that in standardized testing.
No. Note that I claim that even within the risk special, we can still discriminate against people of color, still discriminate against minorities. Not if you are in STEM and like there are very few women, people are subconsciously going to probably like discriminate against them because they're less used to seeing them. Secondly, we claim that even if in those minorities, you can still have more diversity in standardized testing. Note that if you want more people coming for you from a certain income upwards or from a certain background, just normalize their percentage. It said to reflect that, and you've already analyzed to me why it's very likely to happen because university want to show a diverse pool and because they want to be more local. On to the third case on where we get more fitting applicants in this debate. The claim that we heard from opposition in this debate is that we want people to experience more is to experience more, to have more experience and go to extracurricular activities. We really do not know why those things are better than them simply putting in the hours and actually studying those such subjects. We really don't know why someone studying for math is not valuable in itself, but there's something strong that the process of them studying does screen them in a much more effective way than whether or not they had the ability to access those extracurriculum, not only because those extracurriculum are very likely to be more accessible to the rich and have more opportunities to do so, but because we think there is a strong correlation between your ability to put in hours and actually prepare for tests, a mechanism which is basically how university functions, and therefore make the most out of university and the resource given to you, which those are precisely the people we want to prioritize going to university as opposed to people who might be very charismatic and creative, whatever that means, but not necessarily able to actually take advantage of the classes and lead and use those tools. We need to prioritize them on the paper where they use most effectively. Panel, please support.
Thank you to that speaker for that fine speech. Let's welcome to wrap up the debate, Op Whip.